perfect day to go outside and get some gardening done. Taft talks with our garden expert, Paul James, for 2 News in the Garden.
Good morning. Welcome back to In the Garden. Paul and Taft here. And Paul, you know, over the last few weeks we've been talking about, first of all, the dogwoods. And then we covered the azaleas and how beautiful they are in the spring. Something else that's just as beautiful that requires almost the same kind of care is the hydrangea, another beautiful plant.
That's right. These are so dynamite. They do really well in this area. But again, like the dogwoods and azaleas, you got to site them right. 2-3 hours of morning sun, followed by shade the rest of the day. If they're in that western sun, they're just going to fry, so forget about it. But if you can provide those conditions, these are remarkably hardy, durable, rugged shrubs, and in so many different forms. You know, they're just different flower colors, different leaf textures. There's even a variegated form. So there's so many to choose from. This one you're looking at here, this is actually an endless summer. This is a fairly recent introduction, and it blooms and blooms and blooms throughout the year. Spring, summer, even into fall. So whereas a lot of these, you'll get spring bloom and then they fade away. But still, I mean, it just makes such a statement in the garden.
And you're talking about a statement and the different color of flowers. The interesting thing about this is we can change the color of the flower at least a little bit just by working on the soil.
It's not true of all varieties, but yes, there are those that if the soil is acidic, the flowers will be blue. If the soil is alkaline, the flowers will be pink. If the soil is neutral, pH around 7, you'll get a little bit of both on the same plant, which is a really cool look, I think.
Yeah, it is. You can see it just some of the blooms that we're looking at here. Some of them kind of go from a purple to a pink. So you're going to get different variations in these colors when you stick several of this different kind of variety into the ground.
Right, and then you get some of these that are just kaleidoscopic. I mean, so many different colors on there. It's really cool. And actually, I love this phase where they're just beginning to flower. But this particular variety, which is, it has this black stem. It's called Enchantress. And so even when, these are all deciduous, you know, so even when they lose their leaves, you still get that interesting black stem to look at.
Lots of dynamic color with it. Now, one thing I noticed is I have several of these hydrangeas in my yard, and pruning. That's something we have to talk about. A little bit tricky with these.
Look, we would need about 3 segments to cover everything there is to know about pruning hydrangeas. Here's my first tip. Okay. Don't prune.
Don't prune. That's
okay?
Easy.
Because some of these are born on the previous year's wood.
Okay.
So if you prune at the wrong time, you will likely prune away all the flowers. Okay. Some of them are born on new wood. So here's the general rule of thumb. If they bloom in early spring, right about now, okay, those are the ones that you want to prune after the bloom period. Okay. So once these fade away, go ahead and prune. They're going to set next year's flowers around midsummer into fall a little bit. But that's why I encourage people, by and large, if you don't know which one you've got, just don't bother. Unless you've got some weird branch that's coming off like this and it just looks funny. Okay. Those you can go ahead and prune. Otherwise, I encourage people to just leave well enough alone.
That's what I do. I don't even touch them at all.
You're doing the right thing.
Okay, good. All right. Now, all right, Paul, definitely looking a lot different than what you would see in what we would consider a common hydrangea.
This is Hydrangea quercifolia. So named, quercifolia referring to the oak-like shape of the leaf. Okay. It's shaped like an oak. These are, hands down, one of the toughest plants to put in a landscape that you will ever find anywhere in this area, and I adore them.
Yeah, and you said these can get actually 7 or 8 feet high, so much higher than what you'd see with a typical hydrangea.
They can get pretty big. They can also tolerate more sun than the other hydrangeas, and they're just starting to bloom, but you're gonna see this profusion of white flowers, and they sit up so you can really see them. This plant is just, you know, if you've got a problem spot where you've had difficulty getting some things to grow, this is definitely something to consider.
All right, Paul, we're talking about variegated. This is very interesting, something I've never seen before.
They're so beautiful and they combine so nicely with the solid greens, or the beauty of, you know, these are, again, shade tolerant plants. If you've got a shady spot, they tend to be a little dark. You put a variegated form like this in there with all that white trim on those leaves, and it'll just really highlight that area really beautifully.
Yeah, and lots of different colors of green mixed together. It just gives you more of that color in the garden.
Yep. I just, you know, you can't beat hydrangeas. They're just some of the best plants for this area.
Yeah, beautiful plants, and they're going to give you a lot of color right on through the summer season.
One more thing I noticed about today.
What?
You're wearing a lot more makeup than I am.
A lot more makeup, yeah. I wanted to look good for this segment.